You're listening to the Cinik Radio podcast. Now, your hosts, Igrihe and Cinik.
And you are listening to the Cinik Radio podcast, and I'm your host, Cinik, and joining me, as always, my co-host, and a couple of real true believers, Igrihe and Ryan. And on this week's show, Marvel is on quite the hot streak, but did Man and The Wasp keep the momentum going? We also do a little bit of news and talk about DC's big win to become the heavyweight champion of the world, because we are the Cinik Radio podcast. Like, listen, subscribe. Most importantly, enjoy the show.
Ryan, let's get to the meat of the movie. Was the quest to save Janet Van Dyne after 30 years in the quantum realm enough of a plot to keep you interested?
I don't want to be negative right off the bat. I do think the plot was a little convoluted, and the quest to save her could have been streamlined. And so, if there was something that I would, be a little critical of, I think that it was a bit of a mess to get to what was a fairly standard plot. So I think they hit the right emotional notes as far as like you felt them wanting to find her and to reconnect. But I think the way they got there could have been done better.
How about you, IG?
I agree with what Ryan said. They took a very fun plot, and they convoluted it so much that it became confusing to the audience. And I myself, the huge nerd that I am, had a hard time just kind of keeping track of everything they were actually trying to do. I mean, there were a lot of fun points in it and a lot of fun games that they could play with the plot, but it's something that they made way more advanced and way more into things than it needed to be. So it just really kind of turned into a convoluted mess. It was still fun. I still really enjoyed the movie, but it got overly complex.
My problem with it was I've got no sentimental attachment to Hank or Hope. Hope seems like she's a nice character, and I did start to like her more as the movie went along, but she spent the first movie kind of being a dick to Paul Rudd's character, to Scott Lang, and Hank is just an asshole. Everybody that we encounter in that world dislikes Hank Pym. Them going to save someone they love didn't have any emotional impact for me. It was just kind of like, I don't really know her. Now, if we were on a quest to save Scott Lang's ex-wife or his daughter, I would have been a lot more invested. But if I would have known the plot going into it and we weren't going to review it, I may even waited till this came out on video, because there just wasn't enough of a plot there outright for me to be interested. But since it's Marvel, since it's Ant-Man, I dove in with both feet. IG, Paul Rudd returns as Ant-Man Scott Lang, who's serving 2 years house arrest for helping Cap in Civil War. Did you enjoy his performance as Ant-Man as much as the first?
Paul Rudd is pretty much great in almost everything I've seen him in, from I Love You Man to Role Models, and Ant-Man is no exception, and Man and The Wasp is still no exception. He just has something about him that I really just enjoy watching him on the screen. And he's kind of just funny, just the way he carries himself, but I can believe that he would be that kind of superhero. I mean, it's just eerie how good the choices Disney and Marvel have made in choosing the people to play these characters, because when you first hear them, you're like, there's no way, it doesn't fit. And then you see them do it on screen and you're like, okay, so that fits way better than it should. And this is a perfect example of that, because, nobody thinks any type of superhero when you talk about Paul Rudd, but as Ant-Man and the things Ant-Man does, he's perfect. And so I really, really enjoy Paul Rudd's acting in this. I think there were a lot of things to like about this movie, but the number one thing was Paul Rudd, and he was just amazing in this, how he did everything.
Yeah, he seems like the one guy in Hollywood that you could sit down and actually have a beer with. He's likable. He's very charismatic. He seems interesting. I mean, he's best friends with Jeffrey Dean Morgan, so how could you go wrong there? I mean, anybody that's hanging with JDM, has got to be a pretty cool guy. his performance, I would rate around the same. I don't think they did anything different or anything new. I actually thought they took away from the character a little bit, but they made up for it in other areas. I mean, I enjoy him in everything, from Role Models to this. You know, he's done some serious stuff. Paul Rudd's a quality actor, and it surprised me as much as anybody when they announced that he was going to be a Marvel superhero, because he just doesn't fit that standard mold. Ryan, he's not the smartest guy in the world. He's not the strongest superhero there is, but Rudd's portrayal of Lang is based solely on charm. Do you think that the movies would work as well as they do if they cast anybody else?
No, I think that's a great question. I think he fits the tone of this movie perfectly, where, it's got the kind of the comedic elements, the heist, the relationship with his own family, with his daughter, with his wife, with his wife's boyfriend or husband, whatever it is. Like, the rapport he has with Hope, and there's just like, he fits. And with Hank Pym, he fits the tone of the movie to a T. I don't think I don't think Paul Rudd fits any. You put him in the shoes of any other character in the Marvel universe, he doesn't fit. But this one is perfect. So it's one of those situations, where it's like it's perfectly cast, the actor for the movie, for the role, and again for the tone that they're going for. If they're going for something different, it may or may not work. But I think with the gags that they do, with the size and the fact that even though he clearly got a little jacked for this movie, he doesn't need the physicality that you need to be like a Thor, or you need to be like a Captain America. So you're able to take somebody who is physically unimposing, but does have the charm and does have the comedic timing to really make this movie work. And I think he's perfectly cast for this, and obviously for Ant-Man, the original one.
IG, can you think of anybody else that you would want cast in the role? Could you replace him with any other actor out there?
Well, maybe you could take Michael Pena, who's also in this movie, just because he's hilarious. That's the only other person I would think that would be any fun in it. But I couldn't do without Michael Pena's role as Luis in this, because, he's just the best. I mean, in the first movie and this one, I'm so glad they brought back his little criminal enterprise guys back, because they were great. But as far as anybody else that could do this, nobody that's alive, probably. Maybe some old actors, Charlie Chaplin or something. You could do it silent, maybe.
But actually, we get we get Hank Pym. We get Michael Douglas as Ant-Man. For brief, but we see right there that, if that's a different movie, the tone of that movie is different. It's much more serious. And so, you could recast the actor, but you change what the movie is, and you change again how you're going to tell that story, and you're going to change, the way it's written. So everything changes. It becomes a different story, it becomes a different character, it becomes a different world. If you change the actor. So I think again, he's perfectly cast for this movie. And you could recast it, but I think you get something different if you do that.
And to piggyback on that, they are doing an incredible job being able to build this universe with all these actors and then bring them all together and make things happen, because we had Ant-Man in Civil War, and he worked with all the other Marvel characters that were running around at the time, and he fit. He belonged there, and I'm sure he's going to be in the next Avengers movie, and he's going to belong there. It's one of those things where they've woven such a miraculous web of characters that, at this point, to try and replace him with anybody else, including Michael Douglas as Hank Pym, is probably not a good idea. He is Ant-Man, just like Tony Stark is Iron Man. Paul Rudd is Ant-Man.
Well, and you bring up an interesting question there, because after this next one, we're losing Robert Downey Jr. After this next one, we're probably losing Chris Evans. Maybe possibly Chris Hemsworth, although he's the one of the few originals that came through and said, if there's another story like Ragnarok, we will do it. Do they go ahead and they recast some of these guys, or do they just leave these characters alone and move on to the Captain Marvels of the universe? What do you think, Ron?
That's a great question. I think it depends on what their outlook is, 10, 15 years down the road. I think there was something that came out that said, I think they have plans at least through 2024. If they're, at some point they're going to have to reboot these characters. So the question is, when do you kind of stop the bleeding, or how far do you push it? Do you, I think that at least for the next phase, it looks like they'll be more focused on Black Panther, Captain Marvel, maybe Ant-Man taking the mantle, although Paul Rudd's old, to be a superhero. So, who knows how long he could play the character. So so I think that at least for the time being, they'll be able to get away with having these newer characters, Doctor Strange, that can kind of carry the mantle. But at some point, we're going to need another Iron Man. And so the question is, do you reboot it, or do you go with a new character that takes the mantle, and how does it weave into the universe? Is there an event where they restart everything? These are important questions. I don't think that will happen anytime soon, but I do think that at some point it does have to happen, and it'll be interesting to see how they go about that.
I think a lot of that's going to have to do with the purchase of the Fox Studios, because if we get an influx of X-Men and Fantastic Four, that may change the timeline of what Marvel's doing a little bit. Deadpool could be possibly in an upcoming Avengers movie. It might be less of a necessity to restart these characters if we get Wolverine into the picture and everybody over there that could possibly make the movies worthwhile to watch. What do you think, IG?
Well, the one thing that Marvel has going for them that like DC doesn't, for the most part, is that many of these Marvel characters have had second, third, and sometimes even fourth people take over these characters. There have been more than one people in the Iron Man suit. There have been more than one Spider-Man. There have been obviously now more than one Ant-Man. A lot of these have moved on to other things. They've just had now a female Thor. Marvel has had no problem putting new people into iconic roles. And that leaves it open for them, if they do recast it, to go a completely different direction where you're not completely away from your original source. There's a reason there's a new one. They can basically show the handoff with a cameo. So like paying somebody a cool $1 million to come in for 5 minutes of work, they can get that done. I mean, they've shown the ability. I mean, look how many movies Robert Downey Jr. has been Iron Man in now. It's quite a bit. It's a big list.
Ryan, a lot of Ant-Man, at least the first Ant-Man, with Scott being a smart aleck, ex-con, jaded by the system. Baskin-Robbins even found him out and he lost his job. But the focus of this movie was him more being a doting father. Did the character lose a little something when it lost the razor sharp wit and the sense of humor that he had last time?
I'm going to say yes, because I did feel, while I enjoyed the movie and I thought it was fun, and I'm sure we'll get more into it, there was something missing from it. And I think that there was definitely something missing from Scott, and now I get it, because, in that he has spent a couple years under house arrest, and, he almost lost everything. And so, he's a guy just kind of looking to make it to that last day. And he just wants to be a good father. So I think that, in that way you can kind of sympathize with him, and it works. But so it kind of works narratively, but it definitely does take away from the character, especially with what we got from him last movie. And I think, I couldn't kind of reconcile what was wrong, why something didn't feel right. And I think that's it, that just, he never hit that gear. He always kind of seemed like he was just, he just wanted to get out of there. He was anxious. Like he just wanted to get to that last day. And so that razor sharp wit wasn't there, and the creativity wasn't there. And what makes him, unfortunately it made him a criminal, but what made him an interesting character just wasn't quite there. And for what it's worth, I think Evangeline Lilly took a lot of that, and I think she did a great job. But to some extent, it was at the expense of Scott Lang's character.
Well, the problem is that this isn't just Ant-Man anymore, though. Ant-Man needed to be front and center of the other one, with the other people playing secondary and tertiary characters. This is Ant-Man and the Wasp, so we're really bringing in a new character. So they had to find some way to build Hope's importance in this movie. And yeah, you're right. That took away from Scott Lang. That took away from Paul Rudd's portrayal. But I don't think it took away enough to diminish his part. I think what it really did was just find a way to lift Evangeline Lilly's part, and she did well. I think, the problem with both Ant-Man and Wasp is, in the general Marvel universe, they're not huge characters. So to put the kind of life in them that they did is an amazing feat. And, even though this is probably one of the lower Marvel movies that's probably going to do numbers and everything, it's still a good movie. It's still fun to watch. And that's what you get out of basically tertiary characters in the Marvel universe. These are third, fourth tier characters that they've somehow created this great story and universe around.
I don't know. I had a little bit of a problem with it, IG, and I'll tell you why. Hope flies into the scene, and she is a better version of Ant-Man. And I don't think you want to be, if your name's first on the scorecard, I don't think you want to be the least significant character in the bunch. It's like if we made a Batman movie and we had Ultra Batman. You know, Ultra Batman could fly and do all this other shit that Batman can't do. They made Ant-Man very insignificant in a film that was supposed to be based around him. Now, I realize that we're including her, but I'm going to give you wings and blasters. And the only thing I can do that you can't is grow to a size that I can only maintain for a few seconds and then I get tired and fall asleep. I really think they did Ant-Man's character a disservice there. What do you think, Ryan?
I mean, I tend to agree. I think it's a joke. It's kind of a meta joke within the movie that he's essentially like, you know, version 1.0 of what is the Wasp. Like, why doesn't he have wings? Why can't he shoot blaster? You know, like they're definitely, you know, there's a clear, she's clearly, I mean, at the end of the day, like he really is unnecessary, and she's a better fighter than him. She's got a better suit. She can do everything he can do and then some. So it does, you know, it diminishes. If you look at it kind of, if you take a step back, it kind of diminishes the character. Now, I think the movie still works, and they work well together, but it works on the strength of the characters and their interactions with each other and their chemistry. That's where the strength of the movie is. But if you really kind of take a step back and look at it, it's like, well, why does she need him? They're really, he's a much weaker version of her, and it does, you know, diminish the character a little bit. So I definitely think, and especially with the, you know, I guess it should have been the Wasp and Ant-Man, really. I mean, that's, you know, I read, and I didn't come up with that. I read something earlier today where, you know, I saw a headline or something and I was like, yeah, it's kind of right. It really should have been the Wasp and Ant-Man. I mean, she is clearly the more powerful of the two. She's the better, the more focused, the more trained. You know, in a lot of ways, it was more her movie. We went on an emotional journey with both of them. But yeah, it probably was more a Wasp movie than an Ant-Man movie.
It really was. She's smarter, she's faster, she's stronger, she has a better costume, a better power set. I mean, and he's just kind of bumbling his way through his movies by the seat of his pants. So you're right in that aspect. It really should have been Wasp and Ant-Man. IG, you know how much I despise child actors, but hats off to Abby Ryder-Fotson, who played Scott's daughter, Cassie. The kid can straight act. What were your thoughts on her performance?
She was amazing. She was great. Now, I'm right with you. Most child actors either phone it in or they overact. This kid just was a ball of fun. Every time she was around, there were so many fun things. You know, when Ant-Man was captured and handcuffed and everything, he's like, it's my daughter. She wants FaceTime. I have to answer it. It's an emergency. It's 911. And she's like, have you seen my soccer shoes? It was great. Everything she did. I mean, even covering for him when he was trying to get back, when the FBI was trying to, you know, raid the house. It was just amazing. I can't say enough good things about that kid because she did an amazing job in that, and really well beyond what any other kids could have possibly done. And it really just echoed the first movie because the kid was amazing there too, but she was even better in this one. And I hope she has a good and long career and really has a lot of fun doing it and never has any problems, because that kid deserves it. She's really doing a great job.
Yeah, I hope to not see her puking outside of the Roxy, 5 years from now, which would probably put her around 9 or 10. So let's hope that doesn't happen. Ryan, the big baddie in this one was Ghost. She was all clad in white with a trippy quantum realm phasing power. What did you think of her as a villain, and how does she compare to recent villains in Marvel movies?
I thought she was badass as far as her powers. And what I really liked was that the villain wasn't somebody with kind of parallel powers to the heroes. Like her powers, her phasing ability was nothing like their ability to kind of shrink and or grow massive. So I liked that we got an interesting visual with the battles and fights between them, because it wasn't just a mix of them shrinking and growing and shrinking and growing and dealing with that. So I really enjoyed that part of it. Again, like she's not as good of a villain, I think, as some, we got Thanos and we got Killmonger, probably two of the best villains period, outside of Loki, in the MCU. I don't think she stands up to them, but I also don't think she's at the level of D-level villains like Ronin or Yellow Jacket, who are just not very good. So I think she's a step above them, but she's definitely not at the level of like a Thanos or a Killmonger. But I liked her. I liked her portrayal. I just didn't quite buy it, and it worked mostly, but not 100% there. But I did love the visuals, and I loved her powers, and I loved how they used her powers against Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Well, what I liked about it is that, like Killmonger, her motive behind everything she was doing wasn't like world domination. It wasn't to take over. It wasn't anything like crazy, something like that. It was literally self-serving, trying to fix herself, and it's like Killmonger. All he wanted to do was go back to his birthright. And, I thought that the motivation behind the character was right. Again, it got convoluted in the story and like all of this weird tech jargon and everything to try and make everything work again so she could be whole. But the character itself was a lot of fun. The character itself had good motivation, and I believed it. It worked, and I could see why somebody who was going through what she was going through would be so, conflicted about everything going on. So it was a good portrayal, and the actress did a great job. I just think, again, this was part of the story where it got too convoluted and too messy. I mean, they had a hard time keeping it all clean because there was so many things that they had to try and keep track of.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I mean, her motivation was good. Her powers were very, very visually pleasing. They were very cool. Not be able to hit her all the time and to phase through walls, all the things that she was doing was very cool. The only problem I had was the costume. It looked to me from step one like a Destiny character. If you've ever played the Destiny games online or on PS or Xbox, she just looked like a Destiny character. I wish they would have done something a little bit different with the outfit. Overall, I thought she was a good villain for the movie, but if you put her in anything else, I think it would be a little bit of a problem. She would have been underpowered. But to fight the two of them, I thought it was enough of a threat to keep me enthusiastic about the conflict. I wasn't like, oh, can we just get past her and do something else? I liked, the way she would just pop out of thin air and scare the hell out of everybody. I thought it was kind of cool. We talked about this before, Ryan. Lang's crew rounded out by the always hilarious Michael Pena, who plays Luis. I mean, this guy cracks me up in everything I see him. But is he only good in small doses? Why do you think he never gets any leading roles? I
would rather have seen a movie about that group trying to get their business off the ground. I thought Luis is great. I thought, T.I. is great. What's the other guy's name? God damn it. The other member of the group, I think he's Russian or Eastern European. Kurt, he was great. I think, his fear is I thought I would love to see a movie just about them, and, Paul Rudd can make a little cameo, but I'd rather just see them try to get their fledgling business off the ground. And, I just think that would be hilarious. But yeah, to answer your question, I don't know why, because he is great. And I think, maybe it is that he just makes a great kind of, he's a great character actor. He's hilarious, but it's in those small doses, and he needs to be kind of like the companion to the leading man. I don't know. I hope he does get a chance, because he is somebody who, and he steals every scene that he's in. Even when he's playing it straight, he steals the scene. So I definitely would like to have seen more of him in it. Yeah,
ever since the movie Observe and Report, and if you guys have never seen Observe and Report out there, you need to see it, because it's just Michael Pena straight being Michael Pena, and he is hilarious. IG, you and I both love that movie. I mean, was he not like the star of that movie, even though he was basically like a third-rated character?
Oh, he was so great in that movie. I mean, he's a pretty good actor because he's got a range and he can do some different things. So it's not always just this character.
The action was hugely reliant on shrinking and then enlarging things. But was it enough to keep you entertained, or did they lean on it a little too much? And what was your favorite gag in the movie?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it was enough. I loved the... so of the things I really liked about the movie, I think one of the things I loved how they used the visuals. I love the visuals both as far as how creative they were with some of the fight scenes, or just even him in the school. I think my favorite gag is him getting kind of half sized in the school, and he's got to put on the sweater. That was my favorite, the funniest gag of the movie. But there's some great gags, and there's again some great action with the changing in sizes. So I think that aspect they got really, really well. They did really, really well. I think the fights again with Ghost, the phasing I think was done really well. I didn't love the stuff in the quantum realm. I did like the stuff with the triglyptides, or however you pronounce those. That was really cool. But other than that, I think we could have gotten more in the quantum realm, and it seemed like they kind of just looked like any other weird little kind of mystical, magical, strange realm. There wasn't anything really unique to me for that. But as far as like the gags and the way they used the shrinking and growing, I think it worked well. Another thing is I liked how the fight scenes were filmed. You could see everything that was going on. And I think a big issue with a lot of these movies, especially the Marvel movies, is that the fight scenes end up just being people punching each other, and it's quick cuts, and it's shaky cam, and you can barely see the action. And so I really liked that we really could see what was going on, and the fights, the fight scenes, the choreography was awesome. So I thought visually, one of my favorite things again was how they shot the fights and how they utilized the shrinking and the growing. I think they did an excellent job with that.
Well, it wasn't one note anymore because they increased the shrinking and growing to a whole bunch of other things. Cars that basically had gear selectors for big and small, and the building that they shrunk down into a wheeling suitcase. And I liked kind of all of the things that they had taken this technology and moved it towards. I thought it was great. I mean, watching them drive down the road in a Matchbox car, and then like later on referring to a Matchbox wheel with more cars in it that you could bring up to full size and drive away. I loved it all. I thought it was a blast. I mean, even when they threw a Pez dispenser out and like enlarged it to get the bad guys away from them. Hilarious. Like all of it worked. I mean, it's a gag that could get overplayed pretty easily, but it hasn't yet. And, maybe if they make more just Ant-Man or Ant-Man and Wasp movies, maybe it will. I don't think they can make that many more of this movie, but he can certainly be a character in other movies, and I think it would be fine, because then you can't keep the focus on this. The power isn't interesting enough to keep it going. The character doesn't have enough stories to keep it going. But so far, so good.
Yeah, I like the Pez dispenser, and I like when he left his costume big and got out of it and ran away in his underwear. I thought that was pretty funny. They keep changing the way that they use the power, even though it's pretty simplistic that it's up and down and up and down, but they keep changing it. It's not the same thing over and over again, which I like. I mean, a few more car chases and I would have been in a different line, a different opinion about it, but I thought it was just enough. And there's just enough time between movies where I don't think the gag gets old. And I think some of the things that they were doing with it was pretty inventive. IG, podcast favorite, Walt Goggins played restaurant owner, tech dealing, office stealing, Sonny Birch, who was kind of a sideline antagonist. I mean, we all love Walt, but would you like to see him as a main villain with more teeth in another movie? Was him as an actor kind of wasted?
Yeah, I think he was wasted, because I think there was a lot of fun to be had. He was just so much fun in the little bit of things he was doing. And he could have been a main villain, but probably not in a Marvel movie. I mean, at least not yet, because he's got to build more of a thing. He's kind of like Gollum's, what's his name's stuff in the Black Panther movie. He's like that level of bad guy. And he's great. He's fun to watch, but you can't have enough story behind him yet. So I'm hoping that they bring him around a few more times, because it is interesting, and I think he could be a frontline villain in something like this. So when they start bringing up other less known superheroes, because Marvel has shown the ability to do so and still make money and have a fun movie, that guy could show back up again, because these are all still happening kind of in the same universe and the same world. They're all reachable for each other. So yeah, I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Ryan, are we a lab accident away from Walton Goggins being a supervillain and having a real good time? Or do you think they should just kind of move past that now that they've used the character?
I would say move past that. I think I think he's great. I think Walton Goggins is is an awesome actor. He's a kind of a scene stealer, scene chewer, tons of charisma. That being said, I don't think he didn't bring anything new to this character that makes me think, wow, I want to see that guy. I will say, I was disappointed that Claw died, because I thought I loved going back to Black Panther, I loved how Andy Serkis, it looked like he was having the time of his life playing that part. So in some ways, I kind of wish we had more of that character. But in this case, like we've seen Walton Goggins kind of play this character before, and so there was nothing about it that made me think, wow, I really got to see this guy. That's how he is. That's how he acts, and it's great. And again, I love it. But there are plenty of other roles that he's been in and that he will be in where we can kind of get that from him. So yeah, I think that was the perfect amount of him for this movie, and I don't necessarily have to see that character ever again, because again, we'll see him in plenty of other roles where he'll be plenty charismatic and he'll actually get good stuff written for him, because again, the track record for Marvel villains isn't that good, so I'd rather see him elsewhere.
I don't know, there's something about him as an actor that to think of him as a villain gets me excited. If you've ever watched the series Justified, he was a scary motherfucker in that show. Quick shout out to a former guest of the show, Josh Michael, for being in Ant-Man as one of Sonny Burch's henchmen for at least the restaurant scene. So that was pretty cool to see him. I mean, up-and-coming actor. We got to interview him, so I always like when he shows up places. IG, do you think Truth Serum is real, and would you try it just to see if it would work out?
Oh, it's got to be real. I mean, maybe it just makes you a little more open to suggestion, but so does alcohol. And I've known a lot of people to tell a little bit more truth once you put enough of the devil's urine in them there. You get them drinking a little heavy and they're about to tell you all the truths. No, there's nothing like that. Come on.
I always thought Truth Serum was enough bourbon. I mean, you put enough bourbon in me, I'll tell you anything you want to know. Ryan, when the trailer came out, people yelled about the science of the movie. It's not accurate. It's not right. Have people become too picky or too smart? I mean, if a movie stays within the realm of scientific possibility, are we going to have a lot less fun at the theater?
I mean, in this world, no. So yeah, if you're doing a movie like The Martian, we want the science to be pretty accurate. You do a movie like Interstellar, we want the science to be pretty strong. Like these movies, look, they're about people who can do things that literally defy the laws of physics. So I'm going to give a lot, on that. Now, what I will say, and a problem I did have with the movie is, with any of these movies, you want to, I want a clear idea on what the rules are. And this applies to what the characters' powers are, and this applies to the science in the movie. So, I don't need you to explain every little thing, but I do want to kind of understand what are the rules that we're playing with and play within that rule set. And I think what frustrates me about this is that a lot of times they'll use some science jargon in place of actually explaining like what the hell's going on. So for a lot of this movie, it wasn't about whether or not the science is right or not. If I could go look up and read articles about whether or not they get the science right. I don't care about that. But what bothers me is that they just throw in scientific jargon instead of explaining what the hell's going on. And so the whole movie, at some point, I just gave up. I'm like, you know what? I'm not even going to try to understand what's going on because they're not even trying to help me understand what's going on. And that's frustrating. So yeah, it's like, give me the rules. Let me know what works, what doesn't work, what are the physics in this world, and I'm happy to sit back and roll with it. But don't give me this halfway stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand. And also, what's the movie again? Is it trying to tell me that this is a real world and what can happen in real life, or is it not?
I think Scott Lang said it best: "Do you guys just put quantum in front of everything?"
Well, that pissed me off too, because it's like, okay, so they're acknowledging what they're doing and they're just gonna brush it off. Like, no, you don't get a pass by acknowledging the bullshit that you're pulling on me. No, that doesn't work like that. So that when he said that line, that pissed me off even more.
Are you shocked, IG, that Ryan's pissed?
Ryan Johnson gets a full fucking pass on all that shit. Leia can fly, but fucking put quantum in front of shit. Ryan's off the deep end. I'm out of this train. Come on. It's too far.
IG?
Seriously, Ryan? Oh, my God.
IG, Janet returns from the quantum realm with some new powers. Is there a possibility that we're setting her up to be the villain in the next Ant-Man and Wasp 2 movie?
Well, I don't know as that they were genuinely powers. I think that, like they explained earlier in the movie, her time in that realm may have infused her with energy that could help balance out Ghost. So I think maybe just that might have been a one-time I can touch you thing and everything kind of balances out, and then it removed whatever excess from her. I'm waiting to see. Maybe she does have real power, but what's her power? Is she like human lithium? She can just calm you down by putting her hands on you. We already have that. We've got Mantis. We don't need her.
Her real power was predicting technological advances 30 years in the future, because somehow she was able to use the computer that clearly she had never been able to use, in technology that's way beyond anything she'd ever seen, but she was able to use it perfectly fine to help them find her. So
rewrite code.
Exactly.
Rewrite code on stuff that she'd never done in the quantum realm. She's doing quantum computing, Ryan. Right. So you just got to put quantum in front of it, and it counts for all of it.
Ryan, if you think that Apple hasn't opened a store in the quantum realm, you're out of your mind. You know they're there. You got to be out in front of Samsung. She probably has a quantum iPhone and a quantum iPad. Well, we can't walk away from this podcast without talking about the cutscene. Ryan, Ash everywhere. Did it surprise you that they went that route? And did it answer questions to you where was Ant-Man during the Infinity War?
I mean, it doesn't answer where he was, I guess, because I guess it does answer where he was. It doesn't really answer why he wasn't called on to help. But regardless, I expected something that tied in, and that was pretty brutal. Like, I actually didn't expect them to go there, and with him being stuck, it's kind of gut wrenching when you think about it. Cause like, here's this movie, it's light-ish tone, everyone seems to have a happy ending. He gets out, he's off house arrest. She gets her mother back. Her mother's sane. Everything's okay. Everyone's happy. And then to end it with him being not only trapped in the quantum realm, but everybody he loves, who knows what happened to his daughter, but everybody else dead. That was rough. That was actually pretty brutal. So I was kind of surprised that they went there. I thought they'd acknowledge it, but yeah, that was pretty rough that they went there.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, the theater I was in, and it was real light. I bought my tickets ahead of time, and I was surprised at how many seats were available. So I'm not surprised that they came in under what they thought they were going to make, but there was audible gas during that. I mean, everybody stayed because they knew it was a Marvel movie, and people were, at least for the second, upset that this had just happened. So I liked that. I liked the surprise of it. I didn't expect it. I don't like when they do these cutscenes and they have absolutely no bearing or meaning. And this one did. So it was one of the best parts of the movie for me.
Well, that's the thing, is that you needed to find a way to tie him back into the Avengers. And that was a perfect way to do it. Now, yeah, it was heart-wrenching and it was gut-punching, but it needed to be done. It needed to give some kind of motive. I mean, I guess my reason that he wasn't involved, having seen this movie now, is maybe they all thought that he still didn't have the suit anymore, didn't know Hank Pym had another one, and thought, well, he's not anybody without the suit. It's kind of like Iron Man. Without the suit, he's nothing really. So you really got to have something. And if he didn't have his powerful suit, what good is he to have around? That, and maybe they still thought he was on house arrest. And really he was for some of that time. So maybe, even it's supposed to be 2 years of probation afterwards. So maybe he's not supposed to travel across the country to be in whatever fight next. I don't know. It's personally not supposed to, especially not supposed to go to Wakanda. That's for darn tootin'. So yeah, I think it was an important way to tie him in. And they've put out some teaser posters already for the next Avengers stuff. And both Hawkeye and Ant-Man are on the posters, along with the Hulk and some weird unitard. We'll get on that some other day. But yeah, I'm glad that they gave him an actual reason. Now I'm hoping that doesn't lead to a Hawkeye one-off spin-off, like he gets his own movie, because as much as I love Hawkeye, he does not need his own movie. Please don't do that, Marvel.
Yeah, I love Jeremy Renner, but we've already saw that in one of the Bourne movies. We don't need to see it again. Ryan, will Ant-Man get out of the quantum realm? Will he be in Avengers 4? Your final thoughts on the movie and your rating?
I think that'll play into some of the plot to Avengers 4. I wonder how his getting out, or if the quantum realm plays a role in them figuring out how to rescue everyone. So it'll be interesting. I think that they do a good job of setting up the next movie. My major issue with the movie was you got me. All right. So my major issues with the movie was the plot. I think the story was a little convoluted, and just a little too much going on, and too much science jargon, and they have the building, and then they lost the building, and they have the building again, and they lose the building again. I think it was too much of that stuff going on. There was just too much, and I think they could have streamlined the story and still kept the emotional weight, because emotional weight was there when they were telling, when Hope told the story, was learning about her mother and what happened, and remembering what, those intimate moments. That was where it had its heart. For Scott Lang, it had its heart was when he was with his daughter, when he was, those moments where there was that fear that he may not, he may have to go back to jail. Like, there was a genuine, the performance is actually very nuanced, because he genuinely was scared. You can tell that he didn't have the wit and the quick wit and the kind of cynicism and that he had in the first movie, because he genuinely was afraid of going back to jail and what would happen to him. So I think the chemistry between the characters, the performances of the characters were all really good down the line. I thought everybody did a great job. So I think the strength of the movie was in the characters and not in the story. And so I think if they would have focused more on the characters and their chemistry and the relationships, I think would have made a better movie and wouldn't have been so convoluted and could have shortened it a little bit. I did love the effects. I loved how, again, I love visually how the fights looked. I love visually what they did with the growing and shrinking. I think it was creative. I don't know how much longer they can go with it. Definitely the tone was very similar to the first movie, and so I don't know that I'm not dying to see an Ant-Man 3. I think they need to go somewhere else with another movie. But that being said, I think it was a fun movie. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I give it a solid 7.5. I think it was maybe, in my own theater experience, probably a little bit less than the first Ant-Man. I really enjoyed Ant-Man, and I don't know if it was just so new and fresh. But I think this was a little bit below that for me, but definitely I give it a solid 7.5. It was a fun movie, had its strengths and weaknesses, but I definitely enjoyed watching it.
Yeah, I'm going to echo a lot of what you said. I'm going to give it a 7. And I think some of that is based upon, just having the Avengers, Deadpool 2 and Black Panther earlier in the year. It's really hard to follow those as your examples of Marvel characters, because they were all pretty good, and I think above this one. However, this one was still a lot of fun. I'm glad I saw it. I'm glad I had a good time going to see it. I'm glad I sat with my wife, because she loves all the Marvel movies too. It was really just a good time, and there's nothing wrong with a good popcorn movie, and it doesn't need to be so deep, and that's what they tried to do with the story, is make it a little deeper than it needed to be. That was one of the problems, and that's why it's only getting a 7 from me. That being said, it was still beautiful to watch. It was really well done effects. They just keep knocking it out of the park over at Disney and Marvel. Just everything they do with the effects works. And I couldn't say enough good things about that. And it was just, Paul Rudd is amazing. I don't care. Anything he's in, go check it out, especially if there's any comedic line in it at all. And when he was emulating Hope's mom, guess what? I bought it. He can let the feminine side just roll out anytime he wants, because he can make it work.
All right, I'm going to first start this off with Marvel. What the fuck? You have Bobby Cavalli, and the most you can think to do with him is for him to hug Paul Rudd in the middle of his family. That guy is just an amazing actor. He was on a season of Boardwalk Empire, and he was just fucking terrifying. And you have him giving hugs and doing nothing else. And that was an abortion. That decision was an abortion to me. I mean, this fucking guy, he should have numerous Academy Awards. He should be lead role in like every movie, and you do nothing with him. And that's why it kind of bothered me that they didn't do anything with Goggins either, really. My questions were critical, but only because the bar has been set so astronomically high over the last 3 or 4 movies. But if we're comparing Ant-Man and Wasp, it would be a large step backwards in terms of momentum. So let's be fair. We'll compare Ant-Man and Wasp to just Ant-Man, the first movie. What it lacked in humor, it made up for in charm. I liked Ghost as a villain. I liked the fight scenes. Visually, she was a lot of fun. I mean, would I see it again? I'm not quite sure, but I think it earned a 7.5 on the Cinik Radio scale. All right, IG, why don't we do a little bit of news and get on out of here?
All right. Well, I got a couple of stories for us to talk about this week. Around 2 p.m. this past Sunday, west of Antelope Road near Citrus Heights, California, the California Highway Patrolman, they saw a shirtless male that I don't have his name yet. They haven't released that, trying to light a cigarette with his car that was on fire.
IG, I had no idea you were headed out to California this weekend. And maybe you should lay off on the sauce a little bit.
Well, I did get a little bit of a tan, so you got to get out there and, you got to smoke them if you got them, right?
Well, smoking kills, but stupidity kills all the time.
Yeah,
Brian, what do you think?
A Darwin Award level story, I guess.
Level 100.
No. It never ceases to amaze me. What was he on? I have no words.
He was on the truth serum,
so.
I think. All that bourbon that Cinik's been drinking, I think, kind of caught up with him. It takes a special kind of stupid to get close to a car fire. Even if you were driving the car when it got on fire, if you really need to light that cigarette that badly, just wait. Somebody will come by with a lighter sooner or later, but my God, I don't know if any of you guys have ever been around a car that ended up on fire. They get real hot real fast. And you can stand 100 feet away and still feel the heat coming off of that car. And to go up and light a cigarette off of it, that dude's got brass balls, my friend, brass balls. My next story, a Florida woman has driven off with her ex-boyfriend atop of her Mercedes-Benz because he didn't want to have her leave their Lauderhill home to pick up the couple's daughter. The couple broke up about 8 months ago, and now they're trying to get a restraining order against her ex-boyfriend, she said, despite them still living together.
The 911 tape of that is priceless because the guy's on the hood. You can hear it. It's like he's driving with the window down, but he's on the hood of the car. There's people driving alongside him videotaping it. It is one of the most interesting things that I've seen on the internet because, he's hanging on by the windshield wiper blade. And if anybody's ever installed a windshield wiper, they're not hanging on by very much. I mean, if she stepped on her brake a little bit, he was going to be all over the highway. If you haven't seen that video yet, you really need to check it out.
And this was Florida?
Oh, yeah. Of course it's Florida. Where else would it be?
Yeah.
I've noticed that too, and nothing against the great state of Florida, but if you watch Live PD, all the crazy shit's going on in Florida. It's got to be the heat and the humidity.
I read something that it seems like Florida is just insane, but there actually is a potential reason why. I think it has something to do with the way that they report their crimes, that. I don't know if it's that they report things sooner than other places, but there is a reason why we get just an inordinate amount of insane stories coming out of Florida. But yeah, it's almost always it's something in Florida. Someone does something crazy in Florida. It's insane.
I think it's called Pascal County in Florida. If you ever watched Live PD, if they've got that county on there, it's going to be a good time because there's all kinds of insane shit happening there every single time. So,
well, now to go to the second most populous state as far as crazy crime goes, we head to Wisconsin, where a Wisconsin woman is facing felony drug charges after police say they found about 82 grams of drugs in her vagina. Desiree Webster, 20-year-old, was arrested June 25th in Shawano after police pulled over her 1997 Monte Carlo she was driving. Her companion, the 39-year-old Gerald McCullum, a convicted drug dealer, was also in the car. Officers pulled over the car after getting a tip that McCullum might be selling heroin, cocaine, marijuana, meth, and other drugs.
That's taking drug muling the most personal way I know how. And the fact that she's got basically enough drugs in her to get John Belushi and Chris Farley high, I just find amazing. I mean, I've heard of here, hide my gun or hide my bag of weed. I've never heard of here, hide my whole shipment inside you. That's a hell of a girlfriend. She's committed with a C.
She's a keeper. She's totally a keeper at that point. 82 grams of drugs in her vagina. That is an insane amount of drugs. Maybe she's just trying to fill a need. I don't know. She's filling something for sure. So this past weekend, Travis Pastrana, over 400 feet of total jumps in Las Vegas. One jump over 52 cars, a jump over 16 buses, and one jump over the fountain in front of Caesars Palace Hotel and Casino, breaking 3 of legendary Daredevil Evel Knievel's most insane records.
That's rough because whenever an old record gets broken, the tech in motorcycles has gone so far. You can even buy a suit now that'll give you less wind resistance that'll carry you further. I find it hard whenever we say, oh, well, it shattered that record. Yeah, but they're not playing with. If he drove Evel Knievel's bike and had the same wood resistance, had everything that if we did the same exact thing that Evel Knievel did, I would be completely on board with saying a new record. But we don't know if he had nitrous in the bike. We don't know if the bike weighed less. I mean, there's so many varying factors. If we're going to get the science right, I think they stay where they are. And then we make new records and we don't say that, oh, he's replaced Evel Knievel, because those bikes that he was jumping with weren't the safest things in the world, didn't have the best suspension in the world. And I mean, he had the broken bones to prove it. What do you think, Ryan?
I agree. I think that we almost need to adjust for like technological inflation when it comes to some of these records, because whether it's physical, whether it's, a high jump or somebody doing something on their own where you just have access to better training, to better, like there was, a time, like a better track, like there were, this point where like they had changed the actual running surface, and all of a sudden all these records were being broken, not because the athletes were getting any better, but because the track was softer, springier, and allowed for faster running. It's like you have all these technological innovations and improvements, from compression clothes to better shoes to whatever it is, to better bikes, to to better training, to coaches, to food, all this stuff that it's kind of hard to compare athletes from any generation, because it should always get better. So I don't know how impressive that is, because if he did it, if he took a rickety old bike from the same time and subject himself to the same conditions, great, but he probably didn't. So is it really that impressive?
Well, wasn't it a thing a couple Olympics ago too, where the swimmers were basically wearing fins? They like had fin socks. You're not playing on the same playing field. We can't put you up against the swimmers of old when you're wearing basically fins.
Well, and they've some of these places have actually backtracked and adjusted their rules to get away from that, so that the sports become more pure again. But when you're talking about motorcycles, you know what? From the 50s and 60s, when Evel Knievel was in his prime, to now, the technology on the motorcycle alone has just gone way past anything that Evel ever had a chance to ride. I mean, I think he was riding an old Harley Davidson doing these tricks. Travis is riding like a dirt bike that is probably fuel injected, and it's a 2-stroke thing, so it accelerates like a bat out of hell. There's all kinds of like things that he's gaining an advantage on. Not only that, but it's designed to jump, where Evel Knievel was just like, I'll jump anything, I don't care. It's a completely different game. So is it really an accomplishment to have done more than Evel Knievel? Well, not really. But was it fun to watch? Sure. So my next story comes from the world of tech. Now, AT&T's merger with Time Warner is in the news lately, and it's presented the clear possibility of harming consumers. Somewhere on the list is the possibility of turning the carefully curated, profitable, and beloved HBO into a big data monster like Netflix. And to hear AT&T's executive in charge of the cable channel tell it all, that's exactly what's planned for the future.
I don't even know where to start on how fucked up it is that it's basically going to come down to like 2 or 3 companies owning everything. Disney has done a good job with some of the products that they've bought, and it makes us excited. But at the same time, I went and sat through the previews for Ant-Man, and every other movie was a Disney movie. We're getting to the point where, can we call it a monopoly? Can we go at a certain point? There's only going to be a few companies left. I don't like the direction that things are going in that way in the entertainment industry. And I mean, I realize that it's being pushed through for profit, and the billionaires have all the say in the world because they now have constitutional rights. Thanks a lot for that, Supreme Court. We'll sway back the other way, and we'll talk to Ryan on this.
I tend to agree with you. I think it's scary because you do have a lot of the power in the hands of a small group, which is going to, limit competition. It can potentially muddy the waters. It creates a blander product that is really more about making money than it is about really, innovating. And, I'm worried, especially with net neutrality. What is AT? I'm an AT&T subscriber, so I don't know if I benefit from it, but already they're kind of taking advantage of what they have. So I'm concerned that, when you're taking, a company as large as AT&T and now giving them, Time Warner, I don't know what good could come out of this in the long run, especially with just really eliminating competition. And I think, unfortunately, I don't know that we're going to have, the government's not really going to have our backs as consumers. So short term, it might work out well for some people, but I just don't see how this is a good thing down the road.
Well, if they're big enough, they won't have to worry about being stopped when they start those hunger gain programs, right? Because that's right around the corner, is that we'll have people just compete for their lives Why not? I mean, we own everything.
And that's the problem is, HBO has done such a good job of getting away from their old reputation of we're going to have a couple of campy original programming and we're going to play the same 4 movies in rotation for 6 weeks at a time to what they have now, which is great programming, great original content. But if they get on this kind of thing where they're just worried about how much content is available at a time, are they going to get away from things like Game of Thrones and everything that they've done? Westworld. I mean, they've had all these great shows. I mean, Vice Principals. Are we going to get more shows like that if this continues on this path? That's what I fear, and I'm hoping that it all kind of comes out in the wash, and maybe they realize that let HBO run the way HBO has been running because it's been doing a great job. I'm hoping it just stays that way. My last story of the day, Daniel Cormier, who jogged into the ring wearing his mandatory branded t-shirt over a long sleeve t-shirt tucked into his warm-up pants, who is somehow actually the head wrestling coach at Gilroy High School, but donates his entire salary to his assistant coaches, who Lucas Bourdon has appropriately dubbed the daddest man on the planet, knocked out Stipe Miocic, and the answer he'd always hoped for has been given. He is now the champion.
Well, he's the champion in 2 different divisions, which is extremely impressive, but I don't know how he's been making 205 because he's a big boy. I mean, he really does have an ultra dad bod. We were joking about me having a better physique over him when he won the heavyweight championship of the world. And that's not saying a lot, folks. It was a gutsy performance against arguably the best heavyweight of all time. I mean, it caught me completely by surprise, and it was a first-round knockout nonetheless. Ryan, what did you think of the fight?
I was happy. I'm really happy for Daniel Cormier. He's one of the really good guys of the sport. If you hear, he's kind of like a 5-tool player when it comes to kind of almost media and MMA. He's a guy who's got as a talent, has amazing wrestling. He's developed very strong striking. He's very articulate. He's a very smart guy. He's got a great career outside of the cage as well. He's a great analyst as far as understanding what's going on inside the octagon. So he's really just a great kind of ambassador for the sport, but he's also somebody who has had his share of struggles, whether it be, almost dying trying to cut weight for the Olympics and missing his shot in the Olympics and, winning the title at 205, but his foil has always been John Jones. And there would always be that kind of asterisk next to his name because, is he really champion or is he only champion because John Jones could never get his act straight? So the fact that he could go in, heavyweight and win a clear victory over one of the best, one of the best heavyweights out there. It was really, really a great moment, and I think it's crazy for him because he's one of these guys who he's a big boy, but he's also got the frame that he could probably fight at 185 pounds. So it's just crazy that he is he could win at heavyweight, and I was somebody I expected him to win, and I thought he had the tools to beat Miocic. I think Miocic is one of the best heavyweights of all time, but I just think Cormier, between his wrestling and the power that he has and his confidence, and just his kind of own hunger, I thought he had a good shot, and I was really, really happy to see him win.
Well, it's a case of nice guys finishing first, at least for once. He took 2 hard blows against Jones, and that really hurt his pride, but he now accomplished something before John Jones ever will. I mean, I have no doubt that someday he'll clean up his act, come back and win the heavyweight title, but Daniel's there. I mean, he's been legitimized. He's never been beat at heavyweight. He only gave up the division because his best friend was a heavyweight and he never wanted to fight him. And he gives full credit to his team and his friends for getting him there and putting him in a situation where he could win. My hat is off to that guy. He's a kind of a short, stubby, non-athletic looking guy. And now he's the champion in 2 divisions, and it's only been done by one person.
If you want to see, one of the cool things about him is he's also a big kind of pro wrestling fan, and so he fought Josh Barnett, who's another guy who's been one of the better fighters for almost 2 decades now. But he and Josh Barnett were like a week away from their fight, and they were just sitting chatting about pro wrestling in this media session. It was one of the first times I really saw him talk, but it was interesting just to see how cool of a guy he is to be sitting in front of a guy who's about to fight, just chatting away, talking pro wrestling, and then he goes in and just dominates one of the best again, one of the best heavyweights of all time. So you really saw from there, like, this guy's legit. And yeah, it was really great to, just a great moment to see him kind of be legitimized and really put his name up there as one of the best fighters, in the history of the sport.
Well, and in a masterful stroke of marketing genius, they had Brock Lesnar cage side to challenge whoever won. He comes in, he calls everybody a piece of shit, and then pushes Daniel across the ring. Did you think it was a little too WWE, Ryan, or were you fully in?
Yeah, I'm a pure, like, I think I'm both a purist and a pragmatist. So those parts kind of conflict with each other. Like, look, I'm a purist as far as sports are concerned. I don't like if it's organic, fine. If there's real hatred, I'm all for it. But if it's manufactured, I just think it's silly, and like that stuff best left for a pro wrestling ring. At the same time, you know what? That fight's going to make a lot of money. And that moment there is going to make them a lot of money. So I think it's silly. It's ridiculous. It's kind of it makes the sport look bad, but it's going to make a lot of money. And when you're in, sport that's still growing in popularity, you do need those moments. You need those McGregor Mayweather moments. You need those moments where, the kind of quote unquote true fans know it's BS. Like, we know that he's likely to ragdoll Brock Lesnar all over the place and likely to finish him very quickly. But that's a moment that will get 1 million, 1.5 million, 2 million pay-per-view buys, and it will get a ton of press. And so it's one of those things that you kind of, as a fan of the sport and someone who wants to see the sport advance, you kind of have to suck it up and say, all right, well, this is one of those things that we need for the sport, but I don't love it.
Well, DC called it his retirement plan. He's going to beat up on Brock and then he's going to retire. I mean, the guy hasn't won a fight in almost 10 years. So we seem to forget, because Brock is such a monstrous figure. I mean, he's around the size of IG and just as intimidating, that we seem to forget that this guy curls up into a ball when he gets hit in the face, and DC just showed he could hit a motherfucker in the face.
That was a problem. And the other part is like, yeah, Brock is a great wrestler. DC's a whole other level of wrestler. So it's not like Brock's getting in there and taking him down. So it's going to be ugly. We're going to see Brock get beaten down pretty badly, pretty quickly. And it's funny because you'll look at it and say, well, you got Brock, who's built like a Greek god. Well, on or off juice, he's a little different, but you got Brock, who's a monster. And yeah, you got dad bod Cormier, but the dad bod's going to destroy Brock. So, but it's a great retirement plan.
Only in the WWE could a mismatch like this, come to pass and Daniel Cormier actually win. But I have a feeling we're going to see Cormier's hand raised, unless Brock gets one of those 5X gloves out in front and somehow knocks him out. It's going to be a long night for Brock Lesnar. IG, take us out.
And that's it for this episode of the Cinik Radio Podcast. I'm Igrihe. We had a great time bringing you this week's show. Please send all your comments, questions, concerns, and any crazy news stories from your neck of the woods to CINIKRADIO@gmail.com. Find us on the internet at CINIKRADIO.com. Look for us on Facebook at Facebook.com/CINIKRADIO. And find us on Twitter at CINIKRADIO. Continue to like, listen, subscribe, and share this with all your friends and family. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at CINIKRADIO.com. Available for download on iTunes.